Well, good morning, and thanks for being here and for giving me the opportunity, I don't want to step in front of that, giving me the opportunity to visit with you about consumers. And that's what we're going to talk about here over the next 45 minutes or so. I'm going to give you some research and a couple models to help you understand at least today's consumer and a little bit about them. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, because I sometimes will just forget to do that. So if something doesn't make sense or you've got a comment on it, raise your hand. This is my email address. It's also in the proceedings. Would enjoy having conversations with you about anything that we're talking about here today in regards to the center. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're an international not-for-profit based in Kansas City, Missouri. We've been around since 2007, and our sole mission is to build consumer trust and confidence in today's food system. Now let me just clarify that and context that for just a moment. We don't defend or protect any brands or products or processes or certain methods in regards to food and agriculture. In fact, we're pretty agnostic when it comes to those issues. When we engage with consumers on issues, we really don't engage with any predetermined outcome around that issue. What drives us is to make sure that the consumer today has fair, balanced, impartial information in which they can make an informed decision about the issue or the interest in the food category that they have. So that's really where we are. If you want to know more about us, who our members are, you can go to foodintegrity.org. All of that information is transparently available there. You can take a look at that. The other website that I don't think is in the proceedings, if you just want to jot it down, is our primary consumer-facing site called bestfoodfacts.org. bestfoodfacts.org. That's where we answer common consumer questions about food. So the engine behind that site is men and women like you. Credentialed, third-party, almost exclusively university professionals who are third parties, unbiased, and they're just simply answering common consumer questions about food. So we take your PhD and we convert that into language that the consumer can understand. Sometimes we say we take the PhD and convert it for the ADD, and that's about the kind of concept that we really do. So you can check us out there. Our vision really, though, is to do two things. One, we have an outward-facing vision, which is we want to facilitate a dialogue with consumers. We want to know what they're skeptical about, what they're nervous about, what they're anxious about, because we want to put those fears aside and just give them accurate information to make an informed decision. So we want to engage the consumer. We also want to engage the food system. And our research is really the primary way in which we do that. And we're going to talk about consumer research today and some of the social science as well as the perceptions with consumers. So let's talk a little bit about how do we break through some of this skepticism that's here. And one of the first questions that we always ask is, what happened? What changed? I mean, through the 70s and the 80s, people enjoyed food and agriculture. They enjoyed farming. They enjoyed farmers. And then something seemed to happen. What is that all about? Well, for us, we really go back to, at the center, really about 1968 as the tipping point for really what started us on this route of mistrusting institutions. Because today we have a culture that trusts mistrust. And they come to the argument, or they come to the issue really not trusting you from point A, all right? So 1968 was a very key year, we believe, that really started this eroding of public trust. And for those of you that are old enough to remember, and I know some of you weren't even born in 1968, right? But I see others in here that were, and you'll remember that. We had a flurry of assassinations. Martin Luther King Jr., Bobby Kennedy, assassinated in 1968. For those of us that can remember, this was the first time we had public demonstrations at the Democratic National Convention in protests where police had to intervene, and that was something new for us. The other thing is the Vietnam War was really the first televised war. And so homes in America had the war coming into their home every night with some kind of visual about what was going on in the war. And for those of you who don't remember that, that was not a popular war with our culture. Okay? Those were some things that really started off. For those of you that can remember when we landed on the moon, I believe it was Christmas Eve, 1968. This was the first time we actually had a picture from the moon of the Earth. And this is really what a lot of people will say was the birth of the environmental movement, because it was the first time that we actually saw that our planet was pretty finite. And so that really started off a whole flurry of activity around that. And there were a number of other high-profile events where trust was eroded, whether it was in our political system, whether it was in our religious system, in government, in business, in banking. There was incident after incident after incident, which really led the consumer down this path that whatever belief I had in institutions throughout the 50s and the 60s where we enjoyed great growth and in compliance and innovation is now eroded. I put trust in those institutions. Now they're failing me. I can't really trust anything except come to the equation and say I mistrust things. So what was happening in food and agriculture during that time? Well, we were consolidating, we were integrating, we were applying innovation, we were moving animals indoors, we were scaling the size of production agriculture, we were applying technology to it, we were applying chemistry to it, and we truly have become what the documentary said, Food Inc. We became another institution. And we just simply became another institution that the public distrusts. Because we're large, because we're impersonal, they don't really believe we have values when it comes to that. Now there's other compounding factors that are here, and that is that we have a consuming public that is generationally and geographically removed from food and agriculture progressively. You probably have to go back maybe 2-3 generations before you can find a farmer in your genealogy, maybe 4 or 5 generations. You go into Europe, you're going to go back, what, maybe 8-10 generations before you find that. So there's a disconnect, all right? And consumers believe things have changed, but they really don't know why things have changed. The other aspect that we have to deal with is social media. Social media garners a lot of attention. There's a lot of information out there. You don't control what's true and what's mistruth out on the World Wide Web, and so it's just out there and it's amplified. The other thing is we have an insatiable appetite toward bad news. Good news doesn't sell. Bad news prints papers. It creates 24/7 news channels. We want to hear and we want to see the bad news. We gravitate toward that. And so if there's something about food or something about agriculture that's negative, we pay attention to that. And the other thing that we're dealing with here is food is a necessity. It's a tradition. And people are emotionally tied to food. Whether it's what grandma used to make or what mom made, or whether it's around a holiday, all of those kinds of things come to bear on a lot of the situations that we deal with. Now, let me start with our basic model. This is the trust model, and it begins at the end, okay? It begins with protecting the freedom to operate, which is where most people want to be. Even if you think about your own context, that's what you want, to be able to do, utilize your skill set, do the things that you would normally do with minimal outside disruption. So in order to protect a freedom to operate, we have to earn and maintain a social license. The social license is just simply this privilege of operating with minimal outside disruption, and that's primarily legislation, regulation, and in this case now, today, we have market forces that also disrupt that, by maintaining the public's trust in doing what's right. So you will have the social license. The public will allow you to do the kinds of things that you want to do as long as they trust you and you do it correctly. And to the extent that they don't trust you and you don't do it correctly, then they, and there are plenty of advocacy groups that would love to exercise more social control over today's food system. And that's really where you've got the forces that are battling. So we understand that to protect your freedom to operate, you have to earn and maintain a social license, which means you have to build trust, consumer trust. Trust is a measurable entity. And so when we started this center in 2007, we did research for 3 consecutive years around this model about what are the key drivers to building trust in the food system. And really there are 3 key drivers. Number 1 is influential others. Influential others are credentialed individuals like you, or doctors, or dietitians, or attorneys, well, maybe not attorneys, but maybe CPAs, those kinds of things, all right? They're credentialed individuals. They're also friends and family. Friends and family come as an automatic influence on others in regards to decisions or questions that they would have around the food system. The second driver of that is really our competencies, our science, our technical expertise. It's what we in agriculture like to talk about. Okay, it's what you do day in and day out. It's this ability to utilize our mind, this tying questions and answers to questions to basically hard science. The third driver, though, is this issue of confidence. Confidence is simply where the consumer is asking, are you somebody like me, and can I trust you to do what's right? Okay, so we call that value similarity. That's what they're looking for, is some value similarity. We tested this model with well over 6,000 consumers on a wide variety of issues, anything from animal care and well-being to food safety to environmental sustainability to food affordability, a variety of issues. And the thing that we found out through our research is values are 3 to 5 times more important in building trust than our competencies. Now this was a switch on the light for a lot of us. I've spent my career in food and agriculture. And I, like a lot of others, really oftentimes felt that if the consumer doesn't understand us, if the consumer isn't coming to our way of thinking, it's evident that we haven't given them the right information. So what do? We go out and we commission another research study to get more information and bring it to them and see how they respond and react to that. And if they still don't come to our side of the argument, we go back and we get more information. We just keep bringing them more information. How many times have we said the consumer just needs to be educated? Don't raise your hands. I know you're guilty, all right? You say the consumer just doesn't understand, right? And so if they would understand the amount of information that I have, or if there was a way that I could transfer what I know to them, they would come to my way of thinking. But that's not the issue. They don't want more information. They don't know you. They don't even know if they can trust you. And if they can't trust you, they're not going to receive your information. It's just a social factor of life. So that really brought us to this next model, which is really what we call our sustainability model. And it's written in a triangle for that very purpose. All 3 sides are important. All 3 variables are important. They need to be there, all right? But we have to start at the bottom of the triangle, meaning that we can't make decisions without ethics involved in that. And this is where the consumer starts. They want to hear the ethical justification. So they want to know, what commonality do I have with you in these values? I don't know if you're compassionate. I don't know if you're responsible. I don't know if you're telling me the truth. And I have to know that before I can then listen to your science. Science is important. I'm not saying that it isn't. It has to be there. We have to have the objectivity there, but not at the expense of leaving the ethics out of it. Does that make sense? And then economics, the consumer understands economics. They are truly smarter than what you might perceive them to be. They understand that the food system has to be profitable, but not at the expense of ethics. So here's what's happening. Most of the questions that are being asked today by consumers are ethical questions. Okay? They're asking, should you use crop protection chemicals on the food that I consume? Should you be using genetic modification in the food products that are available to me? Okay, a little closer to home. Should you house that many animals in one location? Should you use subtherapeutic antibiotics in the production of my meat supply? Now, we naturally say, look, science says we can do that, and we can do it safely, and we can do it so that your food supply is more affordable. But they're saying that I'm not asking a can question. I'm asking a should question. And an ethical question is different than a science question. And I want you to justify the ethics before you tell me the science about the economics. Make sense? So what's been happening is we tend to supply the consumer more information. We want to build their knowledge, when in reality, they are going to make decisions based off of feelings and belief. Now, we may not like that, but we have to adjust to that, because that is the new normal. All right, I'm going to stop just for a second before I get into the research. Any questions at all on the trust model or the sustainability model, just to have a context of where I'm coming from? Yes, sir.
How did if you want to call it the other side, build their trust so fast? I mean, we lost ground to that, but the others have just, and they're probably in many ways as hidden as
Sure.
we were at one point.
Sure. I don't have science to really look at that side, but I would have some speculation. Number one is we forgot to talk to the consumer why we were making the changes in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and throughout the last decade. We really haven't engaged the consumer. When they would ask questions, we would say typically, just trust us. Okay? We're bringing you inexpensive food. You can trust us. And that's what we were doing. We've seen this in the whole GM conversation. We talked extensively about GM with the public from probably 1995 to maybe 2001, 2002. But then you look back and then it just dried up and there were no comments. And we did a focus group actually when we were talking about this, and we explained in the focus group, well, we talked about GM, this was all debated in the mid-90s to early 2000. And there was a young mom in the audience, she said, in 1997, I was concerned about what type of beer I was going to buy. Now I've got kids that I'm raising. So I wasn't even participating in the conversation then. I'm interested in the conversation now. So in a large part, I think we kind of left the consumer out about that, and we just never really continued the dialogue. And therefore, what the advocacy group can do is they can play on fear, all right? All they need to do is to create a little bit of anxiousness and anxiety and a little bit of adverse news that's out there, and they can spin up a lot of different arguments based upon that right there. Is there another question here? Arlen?
I was just going to ask if this model is demographically sensitive. Do you have young generations versus old that have more trust issues, or do you have an urban consumer compared to someone in a rural community that's more close to agriculture that has more trust? Is the young mother in central Iowa as anxious as the young mother in New York?
I'm going to say basically no. And you can go back into previous data sets that we've done in various examples of that. There's really no difference between urban, suburban, and non-farm rural in regards to that. You will find that as a gender class, women are much more anxious about food issues than men. Men are much more trusting in technology and innovation than women would be. And so, I mean, if we start to switch where men are doing more of the grocery buying, then that could be the case. Men typically will buy more brand product just because they trust it, whereas women won't. So there's a lot of variables that would fit into that. But basically, throughout demographics, we don't see that much difference. Where I thought there might have been a perceived bias, perhaps on a younger generation versus an older generation, particularly on issues like food safety, the research has refuted that there really doesn't make any difference. You know, my generation, the 50 and up, is just as skeptical as those 35 and down. Okay, let me walk into some of the research. This is insights from 2014. We are in the field every year doing data sets around consumers. So this was research that we fielded in August of 2014. We really centered on three primary arenas of influence that we were interested in: moms, millennials, and foodies. So just over 50% of the respondents to the survey were a mom, a millennial, or a foodie. They were not mutually exclusive. So you can be a mom and a millennial. You can be a foodie and a mom. So you got some crossover there. But we wanted to know more about these communities of interest because they tend to be the ones that are driving most of the social conversations on the web around food. Now, a little bit about the data. This is a 30-minute online survey. It's a national sample, so we do 2005 surveys. Our sampling error, we want a 95% confidence level with a 2.2 ratio there, so that's really what we're shooting for. This was a mixed sample, half women, half men. 60% had children under 18 living at home, fairly educated audience, just under 60% had college degrees. Mostly a white audience, so not a lot of ethnicity in it. 80% Caucasian and Latino, and then the other ethnicities that are there. These are shoppers, all right? So to qualify for the survey, you have to be buying groceries at least once a week, and 53.4% of them did that. Again, mostly suburban, some urban, 19% rural. There are no on-farm responses to this, so we move them out of the data set. Pretty balanced in regards to politics, vegetarianism, probably a little lower on vegetarianism than typically every year that we do. So we'll normally get anywhere from 6 to probably 9% on vegetarian. 27%, so just under 1 in 3, would consider themselves as a consumer advocate. 65% of them considered themselves foodies or strong consumer advocates. And for foodies, they had to actually answer a battery of 29 different questions on a scale of 1 to 10 at 8 to 10 or top box in order to really qualify for a foodie. They had to answer that on all 29 of those questions that were spread throughout the survey. So we dialed that down pretty tightly. We give them, start off the survey every year with a set of life issues. We had 17 life issues. We really want to know, where is food? Is it top of mind, middle of the mind? Where is it? It's not top of mind. The things that were top of mind was health care, the cost of food, the economy, keeping healthy food affordable, and rising energy, all right? So these were the percent respondents, so 72% responded from 8 to 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 in regards to their level of concern. These are rated independently, and then you see the entire score here. To get to food issues, they're not top of mind, they're kind of middle of the mind. Food safety is the #1 food issue that consumers are concerned with. Humane treatment, 49%. Environmental sustainability, 49%. That will differ a little bit, Merlin, by state. Some states are a little more, for instance, we know we oversampled in Michigan. Michigan's more concerned about the environment than Indiana would be. For Indiana, the humane treatment of farm animals was even below 49%. So I just know because we oversampled in those two states last year. Women as a gender class, more concerned about issues than men. Early adopters, this is a classification that tends to be better educated, more income, broader social circles, more concerned about issues than later adopters. The lowest concern, again, an aided question, was having enough food to feed people outside the United States, 33%. Feeding the world does not work as a message with consumers. Let me say that again. Feeding the world is not a message that will work with consumers. The only way that message will work is if you tie the message to some personal benefit to them. They're not interested in what goes on outside the borders. They may read the news, but they're not interested in supporting food and ag to feed the world unless they know what benefit they're accruing from that. So is it making their food more affordable? Is it allowing them more food choices? What's in it for them is what they will really be asking when it comes to that. Sorry to disappoint you on that one, but that's just what the research continues to show. A little bit about the segments, so I'll just build this real quick with moms, rising cost of food, keeping healthy food affordable, healthcare, energy, food safety, and economy. With millennials, 21 to 35 is what we measured there. Healthy food affordable, rising cost of food, healthcare, economy. The early adopter as a class, keeping healthy food affordable, rising healthcare, cost of food, the economy, rising energy. And then for foodies, healthy food affordable, food safety, rising cost of food, healthcare, and the U.S. economy. Do you notice any similarities? Keeping healthy food affordable is a top concern in all four of those classes. They are concerned with affordable nutrition. They're concerned about the affordability of food. Here is the message for the food system and for you as well. Show the consumer what you are doing to bring them affordable nutrition. If you can do that, you will begin to connect with them, because where there's a concern, there is an interest in information discovery. Where there's an interest in information discovery, there will be an opportunity for you to engage them. Without that, if there are no concerns, you are just not going to engage them on these issues. Okay? So a little bit about right direction, wrong track. It's just a simple, a test in the wind. What do you feel about that? 42% said right direction, 30% said wrong track, 27% were unsure. Early adopters as a class, more pessimistic, believe it's on the wrong track. Meaningful and important gender differences. Men, 48% said right direction, 32% of the women said wrong track. So again, if you're looking for an audience to engage, a young mom would be a great audience to engage about food issues. Changes from 2013, 34% to 42%, 38 to 30, with about the same amount of unsure category. I'd love to say there was the Center for Food Integrity that made that change, but I'd be lying to you if I did. Have no idea what that looked like. We'll see what it looks like this year. Here's some interesting differences, though. Moms are still very conflicted when it comes to food issues, okay? The millennials, a little more secure, but what really amazed us were the scores on the foodies. Look at that. 49% of the foodie audience, and that was a pretty tightly defined audience, 49% said it's headed in the right direction. If I had been a betting man going into the survey, I would have said they were going to be the most pessimistic group that's out there. I was proved wrong. They are one of the most optimistic group that is out there because they've figured out the food system. They've figured out what is going to work for them, and that's where they are. Look at that, 16% unsure about that. They are not on the fence, anxious about decisions that they need to make. They've already made those decisions. A little bit about perceptions, and I'm going to rocket through these. Farm animal welfare, I have no problem. Consuming meat, milk, and eggs. 55%, mean score of 7.46, a good score in regards to that. Here's the problem. They don't believe that meat's coming from humanely treated animals. Only 24%, 1 in 4, agree with that statement. 1 in 5 disagrees with that statement. You got a whole bunch of people right here in the middle that are saying, please tell me that you are growing them in a humane fashion, because I don't know whether you are or whether you aren't. So a lot of room to work here. Again, not a great mean score, 5.54. We at least are out of the basement from where we were back in 2008, but we still got a lot of room to grow there. Would they support a law? Yeah, most people would support a law. They are looking for outside control. If they can't trust that it's being done right, they want somebody to come in and ensure that it is done right. So you got a mean score of 7.3. They're willing to go after additional legislation or regulation if necessary. A few things about perception of size. There is a big is bad bias. So this is just on farms. Small farms are likely to put their interest ahead of my interest. 31% saying they would strongly agree with that. When it came to large farms, 47% strongly agree with the statement on large farms. So there's definitely a bias against big. The only way you really alleviate that is by talking about your values and being radically transparent. That's what they're looking for from large in order to be more trusting in that over time. Concerns about trust. I have access to all the information that I want. 31% are saying yes, and again, let's see if we're showing, yeah. We're moving out of this information deficit, so we're heading in the right direction. Again, you got a third of the people saying, I really don't need any more information in regards to make these decisions. I'm confident. At the end of the day, again, the shopper, whether it's male or female, still is confident in their choices, so there's plenty of options there. They're growing in confidence about the food choices that they are making. Beliefs about food, I just want to point out quickly here, there were 18 different issues we gave them about beliefs. I'm going to call your attention here, well, I should stop at the top. They really don't like processed food as a class. It's probably not a big surprise, all right? But it's important that the farmer receive a fair compensation, so they're still considerate of where farmers are. They do believe that animals are treated better on free-range farms than animals where they're confined, so that would coincide with I don't know if they're humanely raised. So you got a 7.35 mean score on that. Let me just go through to this one. I buy certain brands of meat, dairy, and egg products because I know those companies treat their animals humanely. A lot weaker in regards to that. So they may want these things that may not transfer into purchasing behaviors. Now, let me just put in a qualifier here so you understand the consumer. The consumer has every right to demand certain attributes in the production of their food, and they have every right to walk into the retail establishment and pay the least amount of money for the product that's on the shelf. So when we go back and we say, well, we can do that, are you willing to pay for it? Their response is going to be, no, I expect you to do it. You're smart, figure out a way to do it. But I'm sensitive to affordability, but I also want the attributes, okay? And they have every right to do both. So don't let that knock the wheels off your wagon, all right? That's just the way they are. If you want them to be rational, you're going to be disappointed because they don't necessarily make rational decisions. They make decisions off of feelings and belief. Okay, so quickly, what does all this mean? How do we make this relevant, all right? So part of this is just understand skepticism is going to be a way of life. It's just going to be something that we have to deal with. We have to answer their questions. They have really strong questions about the institutional aspects of food and ag, about who's benefiting. Because right now, they see food and ag producers and food manufacturers and food retailers probably benefiting more than they're benefiting. And that's really some of the key questions that they have. The other thing is when you go into the conversation, don't make it your goal to win the argument, okay? Make it your goal to share information in a meaningful, relevant way so they can make an informed decision. And that's really the way you want to couch it. Understand, too, that when they make decisions, they've got a lot of factors that they're trying to balance. There is this bad news bias, there's this big is bad bias, there's this science is irrelevant bias, there's bounded rationality, which just simply means I only have so much time, so much mental energy I'm going to give to this, so you got to make the message quick and to the point, or I'm not going to spend the time really finding that out. So just understand that that's part of it. The other thing is understand that communication today is insular. It used to be that we could make a pronouncement, you could release a paper, and the world would know. Today, because of our web integrated world, we're very tribal, we're very insular in our communication. And so you have to be in that tribe. I'm not welcomed into mommy blogger sites. Okay? It just won't work. But another mom blogger with a food and ag interest would be welcome in those areas, so just keep that in mind. This is just a quote from a mom tribe. We've used this. This is a 2014 quote. Again, this is not unusual to hear them say, you don't need doctors and scientists confirming it when you have hundreds of moms. Okay? So they are looking for those that are in their tribe as an influence to the decisions that they need to make. Now, what messengers are most trusted? This was a measurement of really last year's research. When it came to antibiotics, again, here are just the mean scores. Sorry, it's a busy slide. Family doctor rated top, a university scientist rated second. Whoop. Hit it. A university scientist second, and a scientist who is a mom was third. Okay, so those of you that are women scientists in the room, you're golden. Okay, you are the spokesperson that everybody is looking for. When it came to genetically modified food, looky here. They want a university scientist and a scientist who is a mom more so than a farmer who utilizes the technology. That is what they're looking for in regards to a trusted spokesperson. What elements are most believable? This is just the science. I just want you to know we do social science, so we did regression ratios and all of this. We wanted to know, is the message, is it more important to promote comfort for the consumer or believability? The answer is believability. And then what are they looking for in regards to confidence and competence in the messenger? And that's where we got the mom scientist as the ideal one. Here are the 5 things that we believe need to be in every message to be believable. Number 1 is you have to accurately present risks. If you don't know the risks, then you need to say we don't know all of the risks that are there. But they want to know who's watching the store, who's measuring these things. They want you to be open and transparent. So provide both sides of the stories. Acknowledge that they exist. You don't have to necessarily explain the whole other side, but at least acknowledge that there's others out there that might refute some of the statements I'm about to make. And then touch on emotional drivers. This is what they're looking for. They want to know that you're a person like them, that you care about the things that they're interested in. If there is outside control, whether it's government, whether it's self-assessment, whether it's the EPA, the FDA, USDA, whoever it is, talk about that and then show that you're willing to listen, you're willing to feed back information to them and talk to them about these issues. Now, where do they go for information? No real surprise here. Most of them, and it's growing, they're all going online to get the bulk of that information. That one is in your proceedings as well. So, key takeaways. What do we do with this? Well, we really have to address the skepticism. We have to talk to everybody. And we have to really move outside of perhaps our comfort zone. So if I'm on an airplane, if I'm in a meeting, I need to talk to everyone. I also need to remember I need to talk to grandma, okay? Because she's got some definite opinions about the food system, so don't leave her out, or your second cousin who you think's a crazy person when they come to the Thanksgiving meal, all right? Go ahead and talk to them about these issues. So how do you put it to use? First of all, believability is the key driver to creating trusted information. You have to be believable. Go back to those 5 points. That will tell you how to craft the message as being believable. Identify the groups you want to engage. Because communication is insular, you're going to have to identify one message doesn't fit all. You have to identify what groups you really want to get at first. The other thing, meet them where they are. Okay, so understand what they're interested in, understand what they know, what they don't know, ask a lot of questions, and then develop your strategies. And then speak their language. And again, you are PhDs. They don't necessarily understand that language, so work with somebody like the Center for Food Integrity that can help you modify or get that message honed down in a way that the consumer is really going to understand that. And then just practice this little three-step process. Listen to people first, ask some questions, and then offer them information. Don't start with number 3 where you back the dump truck load of information up to them and dump it. Okay, they're not interested in that. Ask some questions first and listen to what they have to say. And then commit to engage over time. We didn't get here in a generation. We don't get out of here in a generation. It's going to take some time in which to do that. Okay, I'm probably out of time, aren't we?
You're good.
Okay, 2 questions. Yes, sir.
What's the definition that consumers use for healthy food in their goal that they wanted to keep healthy food affordable?
That's a great question, and we're getting ready, hopefully, if we can get it funded, to do a research study, actually with the AARP Foundation, on that issue. We're going to test seniors first in regards to that. We need a whole separate study around that. My presumption is we haven't given the consumer enough descriptive attributes of healthy for them to hang their hat on. What most of them will hang their hat on today is organic. And that's really all they have in their mind in regards to healthy. So it would be a clean label, it would be non-GMO, it would be those attributes that you're excluding would make it healthy in their mind. So we need to better define that and get some better descriptors. That's a great question.
Earlier on, you said that vegan world does not resonate with consumers. How do you square that with the high priority they place on animal welfare, seeing as that doesn't directly affect them, to my mind?
Animal welfare is one of those issues that stirs up the emotions and stirs up the compassion. There's a reason why HSUS and Mercy for Animals and other advocacy groups that want to exercise more control have to continue releasing those videos. And that is because when the consumer sees it, there's an initial emotional connection, but they quickly forget that because they can't bring that home. So when we measured, and we did this a couple years ago, we measured a food safety incident against an animal abuse incident. And how quickly would the consumer rebound? How quickly would they reestablish trust? They quickly reestablished trust on the animal abuse situation. They very slowly reestablished trust on the food safety situation, partly because the food safety situation, if I've got kids at home, if I'm using antibiotics, those kinds of things, I'm going to be much more attuned to that issue than I am with an abuse situation. They don't like the abuse situation. The one thing that a continual release of those videos do, it's like the slow drip on a rock. What it causes is mistrust for everybody. Because what we say is, that's an anomaly, that was a one-off incident, that was something that's been addressed. But then 2 months later, they see another one. 2 months later, they see another one. 2 months later, they see another one. They just say, you know what? This is more endemic than what we initially thought. That's the big difference between the two. I'm going to take one more because then I have to get off. You want other things? Yes?
Topic, some of your shared values, talk about what's an example of a topic where you're going to use shared values rather than hit them with all the facts.
Yeah, of a shared value. Okay, a conversation could go like this. Somebody could say, I don't want genetically modified food. Say, you know, that's interesting. I understand what you're saying. Can you share with me what are your concerns? What have you heard? Where have you heard it? How do you know that's true? What I would do is I would start having conversation, all right? And boil it down to what really is your issue? What's really your concern? Are you concerned that you didn't know about it? Are you concerned that it might cause some health impact on you, on your aging parents, on your young children, whatever that is, all right? And when they start to identify that, identify with their concern. So you can say, if it's aging parents, I know exactly the way you feel because I have aging parents too. And I'm concerned about their diet as well. Or if it's young children, I understand. I have children. I have grandchildren. I understand there's a lot of information out there that's misinformation. I understand how you can be anxious about this. I understand. I'm hearing you. Okay? Just by having that simple dynamic will tell them a lot. It says, you care. And if you care, now I'm willing to hear what you might have to say. I might even ask permission. Can I share with you a few things, or can I share with you maybe some places where you could go to help you get information about that?
So you show a lot of compassion first, that type of thing, and then you try to slowly.
Just demonstrate your humanness. That's really all they're asking. Is because, again, when it comes down to shared values, they want to know, are you a person like me, and can I trust you to do what's right? And that'll be through the conversation. It's not rocket science, but it's just simply a different approach.
Okay, let's
Thank you.
Eric.